All art says something about the artist, the one who created it. For example, we can look at a painting. This is done by a Maryknoll seminarian, Luis Lopez, who was with us years ago. And when we look at the art, we instinctively look and see, do we see any patterns? Do we see any pictures? Especially in something that's abstract like this. So we try to interpret the art itself, but then we also say, what does this picture tell us about the artist? Perhaps when an artist is doing a painting like this, the type of color they use, the style, the brush strokes, they all say something about the artist's perspective on the world around him or her. The same thing like if we read a novel, and a novel, the one who writes it, the characters he or she chooses, the context, the setting, the geography, all of those say something about the interest of the author, the imagination of the author's view of life. Today, we're celebrating the feast of the Holy Trinity. And the Trinity is a mystery. But God is a creator, God is an artist, and so perhaps looking at what God has created, we can learn something about God. What might we learn about God from creation? For me, one of the first things we learn is that God is imaginative. I always enjoy science fiction movies because sometimes you see such strange creatures, like in the series Alien. We see those characters, those creatures in the different movies. But I have often wondered if some aliens came to Earth and they wandered around the Earth and saw some of our animals, what would they think of a giraffe? Or of an elephant, or of a porcupine. We've got our own strange creatures too. And so looking at that part of creation, we might say God is very imaginative. But I think if you look at all of creation, we see that God has a sense of beauty, a sense of majesty, a sense of order. We might ask, if we look at ourselves, what do we learn about God? The scriptures describe us, man and woman, the humanity, as the high point of creation. Genesis says that God made us male and female. We're different, but we're in relationship to each other. God in Genesis said, it's not good for a man to be alone. And so he created woman. They were made for one another. Genesis also says that we're made in the image of God. So if human beings are made to be relational, to have a relationship with each other, then that tells us perhaps about God being relational. And that's what we talk about in the Trinity, the relationship between the Father and the Son and the Spirit. There's one God, but they have a relationship. God has this relationship within the Trinity, sort of on a horizontal plane. But then God is also in relationship with humanity, with all of creation. The first line of the Gospel reading today says, God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. There's a relationship among the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, but there's a relationship between God, the Trinity, and all of us. Understanding how God is helps us to understand more how we are to be. To be relational, that's the core of our being. We're called to focus on our relationship with God and on our relationship with each other. Sometimes we get distracted from paying attention to those relationships. We don't look at the most important things. Perhaps in our relationship with God, we worry about covering our heads in church, or wearing shoes in church, or making the 9 First Fridays, or something like that. And we really miss the central message. Where God's relationship to us is about God's love and the life that God offers us in so many different ways. Looking at our relationships with human beings, sometimes we get distracted and focus on the wrong things. Husbands and wives can focus on the idiosyncrasies or the quirks or the little things that he or she did wrong again. And they fail to focus on the real love and concern that they have for each other. We can also, on a larger scale, focus on the wrong things. Right now, people in the United States and in other countries around the world are really protesting and concerned about racial inequality. It has been triggered by the killing of George Floyd by some police officers in the United States. And I saw a meme that helps us to understand what we're supposed to focus on. The meme said, some people say, it's horrible that an innocent black man was killed, but destroying property has to stop. And others would say, you got the wrong emphasis. Maybe we should be saying, it's terrible that property is being destroyed, but killing innocent black men has to stop. Have to focus on what's really important. When we think about the Trinity in this time of Trinity Sunday, we could just sort of ignore it, write it off as a mystery that we will never understand. But maybe it's better to look and see the Trinity as the expansive love of God, the love that God has for us, that we have to offer to each other. God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. How do we so love each other?